think with that, we will move on to our featured storyteller. And I guess I forgot to mention, we do record these, so if anybody tells a story and doesn't want to record it, let us know, but I think you all do. And we post them on.
We lost the sound. Go ahead.
Okay, how far do we get? Our featured teller tonight is Sandra Nyman, who's been in our group for what, about 3 or 4 years now? And used to be a professor of storytelling down in the Bay Area. So we have a real professional person with us. And so Sandra is going to be our featured teller tonight, and we're all going to be awed by her stories. Thank you. We're setting the bar pretty high for you.
That felt like a setup for sure. Okay. When we talked about who was going to be a featured teller in the season coming up, I said, I'll take January, because January is based on the Roman god Janus. And then I discovered there are absolutely no stories about Janus. But there's certainly a lot of stories that have him in it, because he was second only to Jupiter in the Roman cosmology. And he was the god of beginnings, of entrances, of passages, of dualities, and of endings. He had 2 faces. One faced the past and the other the future. So his goodwill was evoked whenever you finished something or you started something. So let's begin. We'll walk through the passageway that Janus has provided, and we'll go into the past to find a beginning. Every culture has a beginning story. Perhaps you have walked through a doorway which included this beginning. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. And darkness moved upon the face of the water. And the Spirit of God moved upon the water. And God said, let there be light. And there was light, and it was good. But if we go in through another doorway, we will find that not every culture thinks that light began things, or that it was in fact good. We walk into a story from Vanuatu in the Hebrides. In the beginning, there was light, only light. It was so bright, it burned, it hurt. There was no rest from it. And under that light that was so bright, that was so burning, was the mother, Potgoro. She was the rock. And that light burned her so that she split open. And from her came the 12 children, the first of whom was Quat. And the other children said, oh, this light, there is no rest from it. It's too bright, it hurts. What, do something? Well, he looked for something to do, but there was nothing to do. He could not imagine anything beyond the light, beyond the bright, beyond the burning. And then he closed his eyes, but even with closed eyes and cupped eyes, he saw brightness. But then into his imagination there came a dark line, where the sky met the sea. And so he built a canoe and he began to row towards that dark line. On and on and on he went, until at last he reached the darkness that was calm. And she was all darkness and light and peace and quiet. And she took from herself a part and gave it to Quat, which he wrapped in a breadfruit leaf. And then he made the long journey home. And he pulled his canoe up onto the shore, and he said to his siblings, "Quick, you see the birds that have come before my boat. They are the birds that come before night. Night is coming. And you see the birds that have followed me. They're the ones that follow night. Night is coming. We must make our sleeping mats." And so he taught them to use palm fronds and to weave sleeping mats. And they sat down upon the mats. And the second of the children, Tangaro, said, "The sun seems to be moving to the west. Is it falling into the sea?" "No, it is the night that is coming." And he opened the breadfruit leaf, and the night spread into the hut, and then up through the palm fronds above and out into the sky. And he said, "Lie down, close your eyes." But Tangaro said, "Are we dying?" "No, this is sleep. Just it's time for rest." And so it has been from then to now that the birds come and call out and squawk and whistle, and night has arrived. And the birds know when she passes, and so then they wake us up. Night, day, night, day. Let us move to another doorway. Let us enter to another story of a beginning, but this time a story about the beginning of people. Every culture has its stories about where people came from. I happen to like this one from the Miwok people of California. In the beginning, the Great Spirit made all the animal people. And when the animal people had been made, the Great Spirit made real people, people like us. But Grizzly Bear ate them. He did it in the friendliest possible way, but he did consume them.
Oh.
Raven and Crow talked about this and thought, well, maybe there should be people who would know how to do this. And so Raven flew up to the sun because Sun had witnessed the original making. And the sun told all about how red people had been made, but didn't say a word about black or brown or white people. I And so Raven came back with some knowledge and said, let us have a council of the animal people. They were gathered together and they decided that they each had something to contribute, some trait which this people should have. Mountain Lion spoke first. They need claws. They need sharp teeth. They need a voice like mine. "Oh, no," said Grizzly Bear. "That's no good at all. No, 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 your voice is a shriek. They need 4 legs and maybe wings." Grizzly Bear always thought he had a great idea. But Deer spoke and said, no, people need soft, silky ears to pick up the slightest sound. And antlers, for their heads look quite empty without them. Antlers? No, said Mountain Sheep. They need curved horns right against their head so they can butt out of the way anything that tries to stop them. Tails, said Beaver. Flat, practical, sensible tails. No fur on them. Those only invite fleas. Flat, sensible tails, I tell you. They can put mud and sand on them and therefore they can build their homes. And so it went. Everyone had an idea and it went on and on and on till finally Fox said, stop. Stop. Go to the riverbank and there you'll find some red clay. Everybody gather some red clay and make a model of what you think real people should look like. That was a good idea. And every animal thought, well, why didn't I have that idea? So they went off, they got the clay, they started modeling, they started making their person, on and on. It went all day long, it went. Dinner was late, going to bed was late, and only Coyotes kept working. When Coyote was finished, he took his model and he put it right up against the trunk, right under the low hanging branches of a spruce tree. And in the night it began to rain. And all the other models just were spread out into the dirt. And in the morning, the sun came out. And Coyote's person that he had modeled baked in the sun and began to walk about. And so we are descendants of Coyote's model. But all the other animals didn't think that was a very worthwhile contribution. And from this day to that day, probably until tomorrow, animals have been most disappointed with us. Okay, now I'm going to have to apologize for the next story because I don't know how to pronounce the names properly. And I probably did the same with the names from Vanuatu, but I guess there's nobody here who's going to correct me on that one. But this one, probably there will be somebody, and I do apologize. This is a story from Japan, which shows that even if something has begun, it can be reversed. And you might need to begin again and again. The great goddess Izanami gave birth to the islands of Japan, to the god of wind, of mountain, of tree. But when she gave birth to fire, it destroyed her. It hurt her so much that she died and went to the underworld. And her husband, Izanagi, was so distraught. He thought to go down to the underworld and to bring her back. And so he went. When he saw her, she was decomposing. She was filled with worms, and he was disgusted. And he closed the way to the underworld and felt contaminated. And so he went to the river and he bathed. And then he went to the sea and he bathed. And he bathed his left eye and gave birth to the sun, Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun. And he bathed his right eye and he gave birth to Sukani, goddess of the moon. And then he washed his nose out and gave birth to Susanu, god of the sea. But from that beginning, Susanu did not find grace. He stormed about and he made the mountains tremble, the earth quake. And he went to his sister Amaterasu, who received him with caution. What do you want, brother? Why have you come? Well, I thought to say goodbye to you before I took up my kingdom. And also I thought maybe I could go visit our mother in the underworld and bring her words of consolation. No, the underworld has been blocked by our father. Izanagi has given us each a kingdom. Mine is the day sky. And yours, brother, is the sea. You must go and take up the sea. Well, what authority does our father have now over me? I mean, created maybe so, but I can create, you can create. Are we not as great as him? Amaterasu considered those words, and she drew from him his sword, and she broke it into 3 pieces and chewed them and blew out a mist that coalesced into 3 female goddesses. And he thought, that's great. And he took a necklace that their father had given to Amaterasu, ripped it from her, chewed it up, and spat out 5. I hope that was 5. Spat out 5 male gods. And he was so excited by his creativity, by his abilities, that he stomped and went around, and oh, what destruction he caused. He destroyed a rice field of Amaterasu's. He dumped excrement in temples. Amaterasu tried to make excuses for him, but then he flayed a piebald horse and threw her through the roof of a weaving house. And this apparition fell down, hit a little bit, killed the weaving woman. Amaterasu was so humiliated, so feared, that she retreated into a rocky cave and rolled a boulder in front of it, and her light disappeared from the sky. And in that darkness, all the evil gods could make their mischief. And so the good gods got together and said, how can we bring her back? How can we entice her out? And the god of wisdom said, find roosters. Put them in the trees around the cave's entrance. And then take this magical mirror and hang it from a tree in front of the entrance. And then the goddess of mirth, Amanu Ume, was called upon, and she took a wooden tub and turned it upside down, climbed on, and she had covered herself with leaves and plants, and she began to stomp and to dance and to throw off the plants. And pretty soon, all the gods were laughing as she danced and stamped, and they roared with laughter. In the cave, Amaterasu thought, what's that going on? Why are they laughing? And she rolled the boulder just a bit, and her bright light shone out, and all the roosters crowed, and the light hit the mirror and bounced back to her. Who is that bright thing off there? Who has invited that bright thing? Oh, she's our new goddess. She's so much more fun than you. Just go back in your cave. She's much better. Better? Better than me? I think not. And she rolled that boulder away and stepped out. And the god of force grabbed her arm. And a magical rope was placed before the cave, so she could not retreat back in. And so light returned to the world. So they say. Light, dark, night, day, good, bad. All these balances. The old year has ended. The new year has begun. Janice at the doorway, looking back, looking forward. We look into this new year and we see it is dark. And we are filled with doubt and trepidation. But as the young poet, Amanda Gorman said, there is always light if we're brave enough to look for it. If we're brave enough to be it.
Thank you, Sandra, for your creation stories, and I'm sure some of them ring a bell with us, and also for your comments about the light. So we'll now go into a story swap time, and again, if anybody would like to tell a story, let us know during the break, and we will do that. Up next is Bowen. I believe you have a story for us tonight, Bowen. You probably remember meeting Bowen last month at our story swap, so.
Hello, everyone. How are you this evening? Go. Okay. So how many of you like spiders? Okay, I'm not looking for you that are raising your hands. I'm looking for those of you who are going. Because I actually do like spiders quite a bit. And if your natural reaction when you see a spider is to, I hope that at the end of the story, you can consider that before you quickly react. You see, I used to be a natural science illustrator. And one day I was in the field doing sketches. I was sitting down in a field and this tiny little jumping spider, this big, smaller than a grain of rice, jumped on my thumb. And it had jumped around and it didn't see where it was until it turned around and it looked at me with those 8 black shining bead eyes. And it realized it was on a giant 1,000 times bigger than it. And it turned around and bit my thumb and jumped off. Well, I didn't like the biting part, that hurt. But I just had to admire that tiny little thing, that realizing that it was on an enormous enemy, turned around, turned its back on me, defended itself, and escaped. You just have to admire them. You know, scientists have found recently that jumping spiders dream. They have REM sleep, just like people do when we're dreaming. And it was Elizabeth Ellis, the storyteller, who had a dream. And this is the story that came out of that dream. Long ago, the earth and the sky were next to each other. The sky was where the spirits lived, and the earth where people lived. But gradually over time, the sky began to separate from the earth. And the people began to get worried. Because if the sky was too far away, how would their spirits go home? So the people gathered and they discussed what should they do about this problem. Bear came up. I'll handle it. I'm strong. I have the power. I'll bring the sky to the earth. And the people said, oh yes, yes, Bear can do it. He's the strongest among us. But Bear could not force the sky any closer to the earth. Then Coyote came up and said, hey, I'm Coyote. I can do it. I can do anything. Oh, man, this is gonna be so easy. I'll go up there. I'll get that sky down here. And the people said, oh yes, yes, Coyote is the cleverest among us. And if anyone can do it, he can. But Coyote could not trick the sky to come closer to the earth. The people were in great despair now. They thought all is lost. Then a tiny, tiny little voice spoke up. Let a woman do the job. It was Grandmother Spider, the smallest creature of all. And the people started to laugh. How could a tiny, tiny little thing do what the most powerful and the strongest among them could not do? Do what the most clever and cunning of them all could not do? Grandmother Spider, she didn't care. She just started walking on her bent little crooked legs, walking towards the edge of the earth. Took her a long time. But finally she got to the edge of the earth and she started to spin long silk thread. And when she had spun a lot of thread, she threw it. But it was too short. It didn't reach the sky. So she started reeling it in. And she reeled, and she had gathered it all up. And then she spun more thread. She spun and she spun and she spun. She spun until she had so much silk. And she tossed it up into the sky. But it did not reach. So once again, she reeled it. She reeled and she reeled and she reeled this great amount of silk in. And when she had bundled it all up, she spun and she spun and she spun until she spun everything that was in her out. She gathered up this great amount of silk. She threw it with all her might. And it stuck to the sky. Grandmother Spider crawled up, she climbed up this silk. And when she had gotten up there, she rested. And when she had rested enough, she spun more silk and she threw it down and it attached to the earth. And now there were 2 threads of silk connecting sky and earth. And Grandmother Spider did that over and over and over and over again until the sky and the earth are connected. So if your first reaction on seeing a spider is to destroy its web, consider first that it is the smallest things in the world that hold the world.
You're going, another sort of a creation story, I guess, so that's very good. So I think right about now, we're just about at the midpoint, so we're gonna take a break for about 10 minutes. The restrooms are right around the corner, don't trip over the wires, and come on back and we'll save your seats for you. Keep your tickets in hand, okay? Anybody else, Sarah? You're all enjoying yourselves too much, you know, so anyway. So welcome back and thank you for coming to our story group. And I'll have some announcements when we're done with the stories. But right now, the next up is Toby, who is the most animated teller that you are ever going to see.
Diego, ika pole minding America. Teacher, we cannot play against that school, the international school. They're too good. You are just as good as they are. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Malaysia. I taught at an all-girls school. And I taught social studies, PE, high school biology, and I coached softball. Now, in Malaysia at that time, softball was an up-and-coming popular sport. But the best thing was it was inclusive for girls. I thought, what a great opportunity for us to have a girls' team at this high school. So I went to the headmistress, Mrs. Chia. Mrs. Chia, what do you think? Softball team? No money. I thought, what? Huh. Mrs. Chia, I just want you to know that the Convent of the Good Shepherd Girls' School and the Changhua Chinese Girls' School, they all have softball teams, and they are going to be competing at the district tournament. Money got. So I was able to find 11 old cheap softball gloves, 5 worn out softballs, and a wooden bat with lots of dents on it. And the girls came to play. There was Sharipa, Rupa, Suchun, and many more. And we practiced, and they learned to hit that ball and run the bases and kick the ball, fly balls, and the rules of softball. And we played on our field. Well, if you wanted to call it a field, it's more like a dirt playground with divots. And our bases, well, they were burlap bags. Farida's father, who worked at a store, donated them to us. Well, the girls were practicing so hard, and I knew that the tournament was coming up, and they needed to play against the team. A friend of mine, Gene McGill, he was a softball coach of the International School of Kuala Lumpur. This is a private school for non-Malaysian students. So Gene thought, yeah, Toby, it's a great idea. Let's do it. So I went and told the softball girls from my school about this. And their reaction was, ah, Cikgu, semua sombong. I said, girls, we're talking about softball here, okay? So Gene came in the big white school van with the girls. And when he came out, there were the 15 girls coming out behind him, girls of blonde hair, brunette hair, red hair, light skin. And their fathers or parents were probably diplomats and CEOs of big businesses. They came out with crisp navy blue shirts and shiny black cleats. And the girls on my team, well, they had black hair, tan skin. They were wearing old track pants and worn out tennis shoes. But I was able to get them 11 green t-shirts that I found in a box in the PE shed. And their parents, shopkeepers, factory workers. So we all went to the field. And one of the guest players looked around. Hey, coach, where are the bases? Well, don't you see them? They're over there. They're burlap bags. Play ball. So the girls, they were magnificent. The whack! They would hit that ball and the girl would run to first base, round it, get to second. Shortstop picks up the ball, throws it to second. Whoa! Second base catches it, out. It's great. And the girls will run the bases home. Well, at the end of the game, we lost by 3 runs. Oh, Babu Scally girls, you all played so well. Well, it's a tradition in Malaysian schools that the host team provides refreshments to the guests. So we had coconut cake and glasses of orange juice. And the girls went to the guests and presented it to them. And the international girls, they kind of looked at the cake and they looked at the juice and, oh, I'm not hungry. I'm not thirsty. Well, the girls on my team, you could tell their shoulders slumped and they were embarrassed. It was then Sally, who was the captain of the guest team. She came up. She went to Farida and took the cake and the orange juice and said in the national language, Terima kasih. Thank you. Ka-cha! I mean, the ice broke. I mean, the girls started to mingle together. They were eating the cake, drinking the juice and laughing and smiling. And I could hear conversations of, hey, where do you go shopping? What kind of music do you like to listen to? And then the girls on my team, they took from their bag a scarf with the school logo and handed it to the guest players. Now the guests, when they received this gift, they were so surprised with this hospitality. When it was time to leave, the guest team, they took off their softball caps and gave it to the girls on my team. And as they were getting back on the van, I could hear, hey, coach, they speak English. And the girls on my team, Chegu Mereka Suka Disco. Yes, of course they like disco, just like you. And that veil of misconception was lifted up through communication and understanding and for the love of the game.
Thank you, Toby. Okay. Well, wow, we've got another teller tonight. Maggie said that she would like to tell a story for us too.
Well, this is an old folk tale, and I thought of telling it because I've been working on this story a little bit, and when Anne, our opening teller, said, "Wonder why you tell stories," I thought, wonder why I tell this story. It's an interesting folk tale. It's called The Three Wishes, and there once was a woodcutter, a poor woodcutter. He worked all day long cutting the trees down in the forest to cut the firewood, to make the planks, to take into the village to sell. And as hard as he worked, why, he didn't make much money. He and his wife lived in a little hut of a house on the outskirts of the village. And he worked hard, and his wife worked hard for the little meager living that they had. One day, the woodcutter in the forest is looking for a big tree, and he finds this huge oak tree spreading limbs, and he stood there thinking, this tree I can cut down and I will get a lot of lumber from it. I will get a lot of firewood. I will be able to sell it. I will have enough money for a month, maybe more. And he raised up his sharp axe, and he was just about to cut into the tree when he heard this small voice. No, no, please, don't cut down this tree, no. And the woodcutter stopped and he looked all around. What? Where was that coming from? He shook his head and raised his axe again, and then, no, please don't cut down this tree. It's my home. And then the woodcutter looked up, and there, up in the tree limbs, there was a little wood nymph. No, don't cut down this tree. This is my home. And the woodcutter was a kind man. And he agreed. He said, no, I won't cut it down. I didn't know it was your home. No, certainly I won't cut it. And the wood nymph said, thank you, kind sir. For that, I will give you 3 wishes, but use them well, for you will only get 3. Well, the woodcutter went on about his day. He still had to go and find another tree to cut down, and he worked hard all that day, cutting and sawing and hauling. And at the end of the day, he went back to his home, and he was tired. He was exhausted. He was hungry. He sat down in front of the fire, and he said to his wife, dinner, don't you have dinner ready? No, I didn't know you'd be here so soon. No, I don't have dinner ready. You'll have to wait. Now the woodcutter had forgotten all about the incident in the morning, about the little nymph and the 3 wishes, and sitting there so exhausted and hungry and tired, he said, I wish I had a fine, good, big, juicy sausage. And right away, this sausage came clattering down and right on a platter on the table. And he and his wife stared at it, shocked. And what? She said, what is this? How could that be? And he said, oh. And he said, and then he told his wife all that had happened about the wood nymph and not cutting the tree and being granted 3 wishes. And she goes, you've been given 3 wishes? Oh, wonderful. Oh, what could we wish for? And then she went, you just wished for a sausage? You just wished for a sausage? Oh, already wasted a wish. Oh, we could have wished for riches and a big fine mansion to live in, gold, jewelry. We could have wished for jewelry. Oh, and horses and carriages that could take us in style. Oh, husband, how could you have wasted a wish on a sausage? Oh, and she was so furious. She said, I wish that sausage was stuck to the end of your nose. And just like that, the sausage hung from his nose, and the sausage hung there, and they were both shocked. And oh, what are we going to do now? Well, we've got to get this sausage off my nose. And so they pulled and they tugged, but it would not come off. It was stuck. And they pulled it, they pulled it, they pulled it. And the wife started going, well, husband. The wife started saying, well, husband, you know, it's not so bad, you know. I mean, you could be fine with that sausage. And the husband's like, no, we've got to get this off my nose. And she goes, but yes, but you know, you could be fine with the sausage on your nose, and we could still wish for some gold. And with that gold, we could buy so many things. And the husband began to realize that his wife was thinking of wishing for gold and not wishing the sausage off his nose, he quickly said, I wish this sausage was off my nose. And it went right back onto the platter. And they both stared at it, where they had used all three wishes. But they did have a fine sausage dinner that evening for their three wishes.
Thank you. We have another story, perhaps? Yes, Brett.
I have a small, short one from Mullah Nasruddin.
Oh, the wife's full story, good. Oh, there's always great, thanks, Brett.
Am I okay?
Oh, we got that. There you go.
Mullah Nasruddin, sometimes called Hoja, was a real person who lived in the 12th century in Turkey. And he was famous for his wisdom and also his sense of humor. And the Islamic community uses his stories and his incidents even today to teach morality, to teach ethics, and also to teach humor. So I'll give you a short story about Mullah Nasruddin. He was living in his village, and he had a donkey that was very good, very useful. He really liked the donkey. And one day a neighbor came by, and Mullah Nasruddin didn't much like this guy. He thought he was arrogant and maybe would be cruel. So the neighbor said, Nasruddin, can I please borrow your donkey? I need to haul some rocks. And Nasruddin didn't want to subject his donkey to this person. So he said, I'm sorry, but my donkey's not here. Somebody's borrowing him off in the field. Well, of course, just at that minute, the donkey chooses to make a loud braying sound. And so the neighbor says, what do you mean off in the field? I can hear him, he's in the backyard. So Mullah Nasruddin said, who are you going to believe, the donkey or me?
Okay, we've had some great stories tonight, and let us off with the princess who would never marry anybody, and of course, we knew how that was going to wind up, right? But it was a little bit of a surprise ending. And then thank you, Sandra, for your creation stories and stories from the old Roman gods and everything, which are always fascinating. Toby, your softball story, it's great. We have people like you in the Peace Corps. And Bowen, thanks for telling us something good about spiders. So we'll just pick them up and blow them outside when we see them in our house now. And finally, Maggie, the three wishes. I think I'll remember that story for quite a while. And also the wise fool story. So with that, I think we're going to have our next story swap here will be Wednesday, February 12th, just before Valentine's Day, right here, 6 o'clock. Opener is going to be Jerry. And then the featured teller will be Elizabeth Lord, who is always a great person also to come listen to. In fact, Elizabeth runs Story-Oli, and I think next month it's going to be on the 18th, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. at the Brotherhood Tavern down there. Another great place to go and have a beer or something and listen to some stories. It starts at 7, but if you really want to get in and have a seat or something, you better be there, what, 6?
Yeah.
Something like that, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a fun time. Did y'all have a good time? Thank you for coming. I put my hat down here. It wasn't really meant to solicit money, but since you did, thank you. Yeah, Lynn? Okay, so anyway, we hope you'll join us. We go over to the Oli Tap Room, we get a beer or cold soda and some pizzas. So please come over and join the rest of us over there, okay?